It's the MyMichelleLive podcast.
Looking for the God story and news of the day. MyMichelleLive News and Views. Here's Michelle.
Hey, thank you, Big Voice Guy. What an introduction. I am Michelle Mendoza. That was Big Voice Guy, and you are welcome to the table here. My Michelle Live podcasts every day. We are on the air with science and technology, health, news and views, sports, and so much more. When we take on any subject, we want to look for something deeper. Is there some meaning in this? Come on. When something happens in your life, let's say it's an accident, something bad happens, something crazy rocks your world, what is it that we always ask? Why, right? There are some answers to why, and I find it in the God story. Maybe you want to go on this journey with me, because today we're going to be looking into our culture, into what's happening in the world around us, tucked away in the corners, the cults and the crazy religions out there, the news stories that we scratch our heads at, and we ask, why? What's the deeper story? What we're going to look at today is how the deeper story takes us past the headlines, and it reveals that there really is a congruent underlining story, and that in every instance of every crazy story out there, there is someone looking for that God story. That's my argument today. We'll see if you agree with me by the end of the broadcast today. I wanted to look a little bit, though, first at some of the news.
My Michelle Live News Update.
Some of the news that gets your head scratching the most today. Listen to this. It always seems that there's stories like this coming out of Florida. What the heck, Florida? Really? A man mutilated his wife's lover with scissors. This Florida man, he's charged with mutilating his wife's bound lover. He's set to plead guilty to this attack with scissors. He claims, though, he's not guilty because he shouldn't have to be guilty, because he kind of blacked out during the incident. He can't recall any of the details. This bloody mess left the victim with a severed penis. Yeah, 3/4 of his penis cut off. Wow, what a story. But Florida does not have a license on crazy. An Oklahoma man confessed to killing his neighbor, cooking the heart with potatoes. Really? A patient in the hospital stabbed the doctor repeatedly in the face and head. And this was in the city of brotherly love. Listen to this CBSN report.
A doctor is recovering tonight after police say a patient stabbed her in the face at Pennsylvania Hospital. Alicia Roberts has more on the doctor's condition and why some doctors are sounding the alarm about a growing trend in healthcare violence. Alicia?
Yeah, well, Yuki, fortunately, that doctor is recovering. She is expected to be okay. But today's attack comes at a time when healthcare workers are under tremendous pressure.
And this report coming out of New York. New York, start spreading the news, or don't. In this case, a woman is accused, this is horrible too, of punching a 2-year-old in the face on a New York City subway.
This is up to date on the search for the woman accused of punching a toddler on board a subway train. Police releasing this picture of the suspect. Investigators say the 2-year-old was sleeping in his mother's arms when the woman who was panhandling punched him repeatedly in the face. This happening on a C train near the 116th Street station. The boy was taken to the hospital and is okay.
And if that isn't crazy enough for you, let's give you The cancel culture rundown. Some new things that you may not have known are now canceled. Peter Pan, of course, has been canceled. If you haven't heard, because especially that Disney version, because of some of the insensitivity towards Indians. Little House on the Prairie, because of racism. You may have heard me mention that before. Reference to Indians, how they were treated at that time, though Laura Ingalls and her family really took strong stands against the poor treatment of minorities. And this was set just 3 years after slavery was absolutely banned. So why are we canceling things like this again instead of learning our lessons from history? Math is canceled. You've heard that, of course, because those facts that are supposedly set in stone are not fair to minorities who, they aren't smart enough to adhere to facts. That's too difficult. Oh my goodness. Ballet, because it's primarily from a white society. So yeah, there's a lot of cancel things that honestly, we're so busy canceling each other and in some cases cooking each other, for crying out loud. We're not realizing that we all have something primarily positively universal that is in common with each other. We're all seeking for something deeper. I want to share with you something that's changed my life. It's a product, and I used to take it when they paid me to talk about it at the radio station. And when I left my job, I stopped taking the product, right? And everything went south. It's Calitrin. It is a collagen supplement and the best out there. A lot of people take it for weight loss. I mean, people are losing anywhere from 10 to a couple 100 pounds. That's great. But for me, what it did is it helped me sleep. It helped me focus. My hair, skin, and nails were looking spectacular. It is amazing for those who may have arthritis, achy joints, that kind of thing. But man, it really is a fountain of youth in a bottle, and I could feel its effects when I stopped taking it. So I contacted them and said, hey, do you want to be an affiliate? You don't have to sponsor my show. Just give me an opportunity to get the product at a special deal and to share that with my listeners. And that's what we're doing. So go to MyMichelleLive.com, click on the link and learn more about Calitrin, my favorite product. I'm here with my friend Mark Griswold. Today on our News and Views, we're talking about how there is a permeation of God in every area of life that we just don't even realize. We often talk about it in science, where the more you get into science, the more irrefutable it is that it is extraordinarily there's extraordinary intelligent design. When you look at health, you see that our bodies, being fearfully, wonderfully made, have a capacity to heal beyond any comprehension. And when you look at the news of the day and you reason things out through logic, all of the happenings seem to point to a bigger story. And I would also argue that we're all looking for something a little deeper. And that's where my friend Mark comes in, because recently he wrote an article talking about spirituality versus religion. Mark Griswold, today, our off-the-wall commentator. Yes, we're taking it off the wall. That was Duende Music with the a cappella rendition of Off the Wall. We have a link where you may be listening to this. Now back to Mark Griswold. Hey, Mark.
Hey, Michelle. Always good to be here.
Indeed, and it's good to have you. Your blog, I really was fascinated by it. Spiritual, but not religious. You point out that religion is, in essence, rules upon rules. In fact, I thought after I read it, I came up with the phrase "religion" is what we should probably call it.
Yeah.
That, it's so many rules. So in religion, why do people shun the idea, like you point out, of being spiritual but not religious? And what does that phrase actually mean to you?
Well, I think it can mean different things to different people, and both can be right. Everything can be a double-edged sword. And certainly growing up in Seattle and being surrounded by, Seattle's one of the most unchurched places probably on the planet, to be honest.
Yeah, it's in the top of unchurched, de-churched, and atheistic.
And not just, not church going, but just flat out they don't believe in God. They have no religion or no spirituality. Some of them are flat out atheists. But there's a lot of people that are, they'll say, well, I'm spiritual but not religious. And if you dig deeper, that's code to, well, I just believe that everything's okay and you can do whatever you want as long as you're a good person. And that's my definition of a good person, not your definition of a good person. And my mind is so open, my brain has fallen out, right?
We can get that way. I'm not going to lie.
Yeah. But then there's also the spiritual but not religious that Jesus, I believe, came to teach, where he was hammering, the people he hammered on most were the Pharisees and the Sadducees, who were all about the rules. And, you gave me the topic of, you were going to talk about Christianity, cults, and I can't remember what your phraseology was a couple weeks ago. And I was thinking, what am I going to do with this? I don't know. And then last weekend at church, our pastor was preaching on the Sabbath. In fact, he's preached on it the last 2 weekends. And he started off talking about I'm blanking. What's the name of the Jewish book that's not the Torah? The Talmud? The Talmud. And all the rules. Basically, I was thinking, the government, the legislature passes laws, and then each administrative body passes regulations that kind of interpret the laws. So that's kind of what happened, is God put down the 10 commandments were the big ones. There's certainly more within Deuteronomy and Leviticus and all that. But then the Pharisees and the religious leaders of the Old Testament took that even further and interpreted those laws. So one of the laws was keep holy the Sabbath. And that's the one in the 10 commandments that's all about us. That's God saying, here, this is my gift for you. Take a day, relax, don't work. But the priests of the Old Testament, of the Jewish law, took that, and I don't know, I can't remember, but there's like hundreds of pages of what the definition of work was. And one of them was you can only have enough ink to form 2 letters in the Hebrew alphabet. If you're forming more than 2, then you're doing work. Less than 2, it's not work. And there's like, if you're only allowed to take 2 bites of a fig, and if you took a bite of a fig and it didn't taste good and you spit it out, well, you still took a bite. So now you can only take 1 more bite of a different fig. And so it became so onerous that the day of rest became the most stressful day for the Jews. And Jesus came and, he fulfilled the law. He didn't abandon it, but he came up with all these things like, you guys, this is about me. So it's about following the spirit of the law, not the rule of the law. So, in terms of that, it's about spirituality instead of, as you said, religion.
Okay. So what that says to me is that God meets you where you're at. That religion can say, hey, you need to, if you want to know God, you have to look like me. Here in America, we've put a face on it, some white guy sitting behind a pulpit, hellfire, brimstone. And probably if you have a Southern accent, it kind of is a little bit higher up the scale of religion.
Amen.
You have to dress like me. You have to, and so we come up with our own ideas and rules. And so that's where I almost find it refreshing. You mentioned Seattle being unchurched, dechurched, atheistic. I live in that corner of the United States. And in a way, I'm going to be straight up, and I'm going to offend you as you're watching and say, you know what? I find that refreshing because it's sincere. Because, whatever your ponderings are, whatever your thoughts are, it's encumbered by this is the way you must be. And sometimes, I'm sorry, atheistic ideas can be religious in themselves. This is how you must be. But when you get past a lot of that, you get to something a lot deeper. And maybe that is that spirituality, not the religion of it. Something deeper and something real. What are your thoughts?
Right. I was just going to say, I was thinking about the atheists I know and some of the agnostics that I know. And for the most part, they came from a religious background that was very legalistic. I have one.
And it doesn't make sense. So no wonder they're saying, okay, I can't believe in that. That's not real.
She was raised Jehovah's Witness, and it was so oppressive and so abusive that she just said, forget this, I'm done. And, I think she's slowly starting to think, well, in conversations with her, she's more of a agnostic, not an atheist, but I meet other people.
Intellectually honest. Let's just be real. Most thinking atheists will often say, I guess you'd have to say you're agnostic because you really don't know, which really kind of makes all of us agnostic until we stand before the throne room of God. We really don't know. However, evidence is overwhelming, and I can say with surety in my life, there's a God. But if it was just all there for us to see, it would require no faith, right? And that's why they call it faith. Boom. There you go. As I read your blog, Mark, I was pondering, which is what you want to do when you write a good piece, right? It gets people thinking that all religious thinking, all it does is it has us follow rules to bring us closer to God or nirvana or consciousness or one with the universe or the spaghetti monster, or that the force would be with us. No wonder why they say that all roads lead to heaven, because it's kind of like, it's kind of the same no matter what. It's just rules to get you to this place. And it almost seems like it's really you're saying it's the opposite, that we get close to God and then all the things that we should be doing that are maybe the groundwork for a good life kind of fall into place.
Sure. And I want to step back and say that rules aren't unimportant. The key, though, is what's coming from your heart, right? Are you following? In fact, in my Bible study this morning, we were just talking about this. Are you following the rules that God has given us? Because God did give us rules. Are you following them so you can get into heaven? Or are you following them because you love God so much you don't want to disappoint him? And then the other part of that is all the rules that God gave us are for our own good. And, it's not, God doesn't punish sin. Sin punishes itself. You touch the hot stove, that's God not saying, I want to punish you for touching that hot stove. No, the stove's hot, so you're going to get burned. If you use drugs, you're going to feel like garbage. If you sleep with tons of different women or men, you're going to lose your soul. It's just a fact of how God created us. And you can say that that's God punishing us, or you could just say that
God has a better way, that there really is a better way. And I guess the logical outcome of what you're saying, though, is that God cares more about having a relationship with you and then helping to align your life with what is the healthiest and the best and the greatest for a great plan and purpose in your life. It's not about someone coming to you and saying, okay, well, since you know there's a God now, you need to look like me and this is what you need to do, because God takes those things one step at a time. He really cares about who you are, where you're at right now. He loves you exactly where you're at. And that goes beyond religion. You say in your blog, those who only seek to follow the letter of the law will be worshiping the law and not he who created it. That's my favorite. That's a notable quotable right there, Mark. I like it.
Well, I learned the 10 Commandments way back in grade school, and we'd interpret them. We had to do in school, what does this actually mean to you? And I remember the first commandment, thou shalt not worship any other God, no false idols, right? And I think everybody in fifth grade said, oh, well, don't bow down to a little statue, right? Well, I guess the ancient Israelites were bowing down to a golden calf, but most of us today don't really make golden calves to worship. So I think us fifth graders all thought, oh, well, that's not really a problem. We don't worship little golden calves. But we don't realize that that's the first commandment for a reason. It's because we all worship false idols all the time. We worship, our jobs. We worship we could even worship good things, right?
Politics.
Politics, certainly. We can even get to the point where we're worshiping religion, right? How many committees can I serve on at the church? And look at me. I remember talking to someone the other day and they said, oh yeah, growing up, we had hey, how many people have you saved? Let me put that notch in. No, it's not about that, because guess what? You didn't save anyone. God did. Maybe you planted the seed, but yeah, people get so obsessed with the rules that they're, look at me. The Jesus would always say to the Pharisees, you guys have earned your reward here on earth because you're standing on the corner preaching and saying, look at how holy am I? Well, that's good for you. That's your reward. So you don't get one in the afterlife.
As we talk today and wind up our time, we're going to be continuing our broadcast later, talking with a gentleman who's gone all over the world and has found that every single culture, every language, every people, every indigenous group has an understanding, even if it's just basic, of this amazing God who created all things and who desires a relationship with us. Even every religion, to a degree, tries to find it, but it's as though everything that we're really looking for culminates in the person and the work of Jesus Christ. I know that's a controversial thing to say, and as we're broadcasting live on Facebook, people are going to go, oh, I can't believe you said that. But there's something uniquely different about the gospel of Jesus.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Oh, I was going to say, yeah, the difference between Christianity and all the other religions, as long as we're following Jesus and not some Christianity that we decided to make up in our religion rules, is that it's not about the rules. It's about a relationship with Jesus. And he comes to us first and says, you guys have a free pass. I've taken care of it. Whereas every other religion, and there maybe, I don't know all the religions. So, maybe the flying spaghetti monster religion is different, but you don't have to follow. In order to get into heaven, you have to follow the rules.
Well, it's a little bit different in that Jesus fulfilled those rules for us, and we come by grace and not by works. And it's a life-changing thing that happens when that light comes on. And of course, as you're listening, you are welcome to chime in with your thoughts or even your questions. This is the God story that I'm sharing today, and maybe you're on a journey finding that God story in your own life, and maybe this has touched something or you have questions. Well, we're here for you. You can go to MyMichelleLive.com. I'm not a theologian. I'm not someone important. I'm not this grand apologist. I'm just me, but I'm willing to talk to you about it, because to me, this God story is freaking amazing. And so is Mark Griswold, my friend, my buddy, broadcasting from the Idaho area where freedom reigns. Thanks, Mark, for joining us today.
Thank you, Michelle.
My Michelle Live comes to you with thanks from one of our affiliates, in particular, Real Bearded Men. Check out their products. All for our bearded listeners.
All my brothers with beards, raise up your beards. Let that thing grow wild from ear to ear. They say you're so cute, clean shaven. I'm so sorry, dear. This ain't no shave, November's no shaving this year.
Our Brothers with Beards. We have a special deal with Real Bearded Men. Go to our website, get a coupon code, and use the link. You'll get the best deal on products for men with beards. So you're still here. Really cool. I'm glad you're continuing because we're on a never-ending search for the God story. If there is a God and he does have a story, why not look for it? And I'm glad you're doing it with me. In the news of the day, can we make sense of what's going on in a seemingly nonsensical, broken world? And I say, yeah. What if? Just bear with me for a second. What if we were programmed with a need for God, even an understanding that there is a God inside of us. We talked about how that equates to the brain on Tuesday's show. So you may want to go back to MyMichelleLive and listen to our Sci-Tech talk on Tuesday. But let's just say, what if we have an innate kind of a knowing that there's a God, like one true God? What happens when we walk away from that? What happens when we ignore it? Do we see some of the things that we're seeing in our society today? And what if it's not just you and I? What if it's every culture in every area of the entire world? That's what we're taking on today. Maybe the gospel has already been among us. Daniel Kikawa is president of Aloha Ke Akua Ministries. He has a ministry, and their ministry is to indigenous people. He's also senior pastor at Hilo Missionary Church in my favorite place in the entire world, Hilo, Hawaii. And he is our guest today. Daniel, it's good to talk with you again.
Great to be with you again.
So is that maybe what you found, that every culture in one way or another, it's as though God has been written on our hearts, and we can see it play out in every culture, in every place, in every corner, every indigenous peoples, and every tradition of the world, so to speak?
Yes. And I believe that this is what God has been waiting for. He does not want to be the foreign God of the foreign religion, but he's our creator who has always loved us, lovingly made us, and lovingly gave us our place. Acts 17 says he placed every people where they should be. And I don't think our God is a random God where he said, eeny, meeny, miny, mo, I'm going to place these people here and there. But he actually matched the people. He set up, like he's preparing a place in heaven for us now in his love. He set up a place perfect for the people he placed there. And so that this is our loving creator, and who placed us where we are, gave us our language, gave us our culture, because he's the only creator. The devil is not a creator. The Bible says he's a thief. And so he's the creator that gave the original cultures and the languages. And the devil, being a thief, he steals what God has made for these people many times. And when a thief comes into your home, he doesn't run around emptying your trash cans and picking up the dog poop from the yard and run away with that. He takes the very best, most valuable things you have. And so many times we look at different cultures and we say, wow, the devil really got control of this culture or that. We need to throw away the whole thing and start all over, making them like us, like our, quote, Western culture. And that was the missionary thinking in the past. The thinking was we need to, quote, civilize them first. So suits and ties were put on everybody in Polynesia, Asia, and Africa, as this is the right way to come before God, and especially in places like southern Polynesia where it's so hot and humid, that doesn't make any sense at all. And,
no.
And we want them to be, like, quote, civilized. That was the way in the past, because, the devil's, this culture is so demonic and so on. But again, he's not a creator, he's a thief, and he steals what is valuable, and we really need to change our theology around that if the devil stole it, it must be valuable. And God created it for his purposes, for his worship, for his prayer, his intercession, his evangelism, and the devil wanted it because it was so valuable. And we're not here to give the devil what God has made, but we're here to take back what he has stolen and return it back to the true God.
I'm so excited to get into some of the specifics too, some of the stories that you present in some of your books and your teachings. But boy, things that you just said, there's so much to unwrap there. It's as though we may have a gospel. We may know this amazing God, but we're still human. And somehow we like to create people in our own image instead of saying, hey, be like God. It's like, be like us. And it has in many ways devastated cultures instead of maybe like Hudson Taylor, who in the 1800s went to China and he said, we're going to dress in their dress. They wore ponytails. They were called the Ponytail Squad. They spoke the language. They utilized the culture and said, your culture even speaks of God. And they allowed God, Jesus, to infiltrate their hearts and be part of them instead of saying, be like us. And I think we do that. This lesson is something that we should hear because we do that in our culture too, in our churches. You have to dress like us. You have to think like us. You have to act like us. Your ministry doesn't look like our ministry. You're not doing as we're doing. But God came to save the world. And your website, Aloha Ke Akua, God is love. The byline is the Creator's love for the nations. God so loved the world. And you, as you're listening, right where you're at. So there's tremendous stories there of how well-meaning missionaries may have gotten it a little bit wrong. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, I think that they're there. Many of them had a heart after God, and I think they're up there in heaven saying, don't do the same mistakes I have done. Like as a pastor, it's not like I'm smarter or better than my congregation. I just been on the path longer, maybe, and all I can tell them is, don't step in that hole I already did, and it's not good. And so we stand on their shoulders and grow in our knowledge, and also God He is always moving forward. He's not stagnant. And so it's as we learn and grow from the past. And, when you say that we want people to be like us, it's part of our sin nature, that it's our pride. And when I'm teaching missionaries, which is mostly what I do now, I'm saying that, I always think my way is the best because, it's right and best. Because if I have smart parents, I have smart grandparents, and they taught me the way to do things the best. And if your way was better than mine, then they would have taught me that. So your way is strange, funny, the food you eat doesn't, is weird, all of that because, my way is the best, and that's part of our pride nature. And I think that anybody who is married understands that people think differently, and if you're going to work together, we got to respect how other people see things. Mm-hmm. And actually, I believe that that's what God made us like, so that we can become more well-rounded. Each language has its own way of thinking. If you study the brain and language, we think in a certain language. It's like ruts in our brain that we can't jump out of anymore. And somebody who thinks in another language thinks in a totally different way and processes in a totally different way. And that's why if you read books like, say, Watchman Nee, he reads the gospel and he sees things that we don't usually see in our English thinking. And just such revelations, it takes me a long time to read his books. And as you were talking about Hudson Taylor, we really have a difficult time in changing our thinking. And Hudson Taylor, they say every Chinese Christian can trace their, quote, Christian lineage back to Hudson Taylor. And he was attacked by the other missionaries that he was going native. But it's very important because this is about love. God is all about love. And it's not love if he's the foreign God who stayed with his favorite children all this time and has never been with us, which is completely not scriptural. Romans 1:20 clearly says that all people knew God, so that they are without excuse. They knew him so clearly, it says, not dimly, that they knew him clearly, and they are without excuse. So to go to a people and think that, it's kind of prideful to think that we are, like your Savior, going to teach you everything because you don't know, you poor heathens don't know about God. The truth is, the Bible says that they did clearly know him. But like all of us, we fell away. Romans 1:22, 23, 24 says we all fell away. Even Israel did. And that's why he sent his son Jesus, so that we can restore our relationship with our Creator, our loving God, who is always there. He was there from the beginning, lovingly created us, lovingly placed us, and we left him by our free choice. And he, in his love, made the way back home. It's so important that it's love that he made the way back home, not to the foreign God and the foreign religion, and only if you act like my favorite children. That's not love. But he made the way back home to our loving God, and he's like the father of the prodigal son, waiting for us, hoping that we will return, and even sent his son to die for us. And so what we bring is the full mystery of Jesus, what he would do. Studying many native peoples, you find that they knew that God was going to do something wonderful to save them, or he's going to bring something that'll bring them back, or even some of them have that his son was going to do something wonderful. But the full mystery of Christ was not known, and that's what we bring to them, what the Creator did.
And so, in saying that, it is not, as we've let this perception hold, that it's a Western religion. It's not a Western religion. It's a world theology that's been permeated in our hearts since the beginning. The one book that I got acquainted with you with was God of Light, God of Darkness, and the story, the history of Hawaii, the Hawaiian people, and the Hawaiian faith opened my heart to realize the very things that we're talking about today, that God plants a desire for him in our hearts, and he brings us from glory to glory. He brings us from stage to stage as we believe in him. Can you just tell us a bit about that story, a bit about the story of Hawaii, which highlights how God loved the Hawaiian people from the very beginning and walked with them through to the gospel presentation?
Yes, like the Bible says, all people knew the Creator God, and I've researched many cultures and people around the world, and I've always found the name of a benevolent Creator God, and this is the same in Hawaii, benevolent Creator God, who man was sacred to him and not to be killed. And this is the first thing that God told Noah when he came out of the ark, is you will not kill man because he's made in my image. And so this God, no image was ever made of him, because it was said that how can you make an image of something that's so above all that we can have or do? And so there were no images made of him. But there is a warfare for our souls, and the enemy came in, and a man came in who brought in a human sacrifice system. And that is what was there when the missionaries first came. That system was there, but the true God kept on reaching out to the people, giving prophecies to them. And I'm just finishing up a new book talking about the true God of Hawaii. And I found 9 prophecies that were given to Hawaiians before the missionaries arrived, saying that, you know, the true God would come in his new form, or the new God is coming that will change everything. And so you have all these prophecies preparing the people, and I've also included prophecies from New Zealand and Samoa and Tahiti, most places around the world. See, because God wants to be their God. It's, you know, he loves them, and so this system was overthrown before the missionaries arrived, and the Hawaiian people were waiting. And the missionaries landed right on the rock, prophesied over that the true God, the new God in his new form would land. And if you go to Kona, Hawaii today, there's a plaque there that we had put up about the prophecy. And the Kona Walking Tour calls it the Plymouth Rock of Hawaii. And this was, you see, that because God is love, he was waiting for this. He didn't want to be the foreign God of the foreign religion. He wanted to be their God. And so when we actually join this all together at a time where in that book, the overthrowing and repenting of all the human sacrifice of the Hawaiian people, saying, forgive us for that. God brought so many miracles that not everybody who was involved said, I've never seen so many miracles before or after. Because God wants to be our God, not the foreign God of the foreign religion, our Creator and our loving God. And right at that time, so many miracles happen. And this is not a common, uncommon thing, because I have now worked and talked with missionaries because of what we do from all over the world. And every time it came to a place where he could be our God. I have a friend who was one of the first people to go into Mongolia when Mongolia first opened up, because it was totally closed to Christians. And 1994, he went in, and none of the adults were coming to Christ. And then he said, see, like everywhere, they made up a new name for God because you don't know God, and all of your gods are demonic. That was the thought. And so they made up a name for God, but they weren't interested in the brand, a new foreign God, because they have a God. And so he asked them, what do you guys call your creator God? Now, again, why I teach this area is because the devil, a lot of times, there is a false creator God, and you can tell by his nature, so you have to study that. But he asked them, do you have a name for your one benevolent creator God? They said yes. And, okay, what is that name? And his name was Borhan, which means the God of the blue sky. And so he really felt that we need to use this name, so it's not the foreign God, so that, these adults would come into Christ, because it was, none of them had come. And so he said, we will start using this name in public proclamation. And as soon as they did that, he says miracles started to happen, just like in Hawaii. And people started getting healed, and they saw all these different miracles, and all the adults started coming in and said, Borhan has done this for us, our God. has done this through us. He has sent his son Jesus for us. And the movement turned into a movement of 120,000 people plus in a short time once they started using that. I have friends in the Amazon that when they started doing this, God showed up and the whole tribe became Christians. And my mentor, Don Richardson, with his people that he went to in Papua New Guinea, as soon as he joined in with God's plan. God has a plan. He's already working. And when he joined in with God's plan, the people, again, came to Christ where all the adults came to Christ. And I have friends in India who have done the same thing among high-caste Hindus, where it was of high-caste Hindus who had accepted Christ was 0.04%, basically nothing. And the gospel has been preached there for over 2,000 years. And only 0.4, why is that? When our God is so much better than any other God. It just never was a God of love that they could understand. And when they did that, they started a movement, too, of over 120,000 people coming. And this is because it's all about love. And it wasn't love to them.
I had mentioned before we started broadcasting the book, The Unknown God, A Journey with Jesus from East to West by Matthew P. John. And he actually touches on Hinduism in his book, talking about some of the chants and the prayers about God and salvation. And he says it sets the stage for what we are all really looking for, that connection with the one true God. Sometimes we see in culture, do we not, Daniel, that we try to fill in the gaps with man-made things or maybe other gods, but in every culture you are finding that there is indeed a remnant and a base for the God of the Bible, for the Creator God, for this loving God that we talk about on the show every day.
Yes, it's totally scriptural, and I feel it's the devil that wants to hide this from us because it stops the people from knowing that he is love. And that's who God is. God is love. And we can see that it's very scriptural. In Acts 17, Paul says that he placed every people where they should be, that they might reach out for him and perhaps find him, because he's not far from any one of us. And in fact, he says we live and move and have our being in him because we are his children. And he uses, what does he use? A Greek poem. And so
yes,
all of this is there, and we seem to just miss it. But it's so important, because then he's not, the foreign God. He's our Creator. He's our God who has loved us all through this time. And he didn't give us an evil culture and somebody else a good culture. He has left good stuff for our culture, too. Like every culture, we have things that are good and things that we've put in there are, that are not. But we don't throw out the baby with the bathwater, because then it says that he's not ours. He's not a God of love. He, is a God who gave all the good things to his favorite children, and it's not us.
And that's not the case. Some other evidence that you point out in God's fingerprints in Japan, which is an incredible documentary showing us the history and culture and the God of the Bible interwoven into the culture of Japan. Can you share with us some of the evidence that you found?
Well, we did find the name of the Creator God in Japan. It's again, like a hidden thing, but he is the one Creator God of Japan. And there are many beautiful things that are left in Japanese culture. And so the similarities of the values and so on, of Christian values that we can find there, like in the tea ceremony, which is so much like the communion. In fact, it was used as hidden communion when Christians were persecuted in Japan. And these things are so important so that they can be who they are. And that shows love, that they can be, that God made us this way. And there's many things in their culture that are very beautiful that we should not throw out because it's God's legacy for them of his love.
I understand that there's also evidence within kanji where you can see elements of biblical stories. Am I stating that correctly?
Yes, it's the same. The kanji actually comes from the Chinese characters, and we can find the whole gospel story within the characters. Actually, some of the first missionaries actually said they thought that the Chinese language was so difficult that the devil put it there in their way for the gospel. And then they find out that the whole gospel story is written in these Chinese characters. And there are several good books about that. And it is something that, like you say, Hudson Taylor and his group also use. That God left something for us, that this is our story. And one missionary actually, a Red Guard came and said, you foreign devils coming here and so on. And he just started writing out these different figures and showing it to him. And at the end he exclaimed, why? This is our God. And that's why it's so important.
So it was maybe an education for missionaries who are going to share the knowledge of God and then finding the knowledge that God was already there. God was already there, and he brings the completion of that desire by sharing the gospel. Have you found the same conclusion in the indigenous people here in North America?
Yes, definitely. So many of them, they do have a name. In fact, they call him Father. Many of them call him Father or Grandfather. And they knew him and many prophecies about what he was going to do, or the son he was going to bring, or the people who would bring the leaves bound together that would tell them about their God. And because God loves them and has those things, and again, there is a warfare, so there are things that are in every culture, including American culture.
Yes, definitely. We can't forget that. We just don't see it as clearly because, well, it's our culture, and that's just fine, and we're good, and everything else might be evil. And boy, have we played that out in every foreseeable way. But if we can grasp what you're saying and get our heads around it as people who want that connection with God through the gospel, we can be what I like to call, Daniel, the grown-up in the room, and mirror what real love, real connection, dealing with real differences really should look like.
Yes, and I again, it is so important, and we that he is not the foreign God of the foreign religion who stayed with his favorite children.
Yeah.
It's all about love, and that's who God is, and that's why he is, like I say again, he has shown up whenever he could be their God. Like he's waiting. He doesn't want to be that foreign God. He wants to be their God, and when it's presented that way, he shows up. And the whole story of in Asia, it's only the Korean people who have accepted the God of the Bible to any extent, and their Bible is the only one that used their native name of God. And the story is that when it started, they were saying, wow, these people know so much about our God, and saying that he sent his son for us. And that's what started the excitement of the revival that happened in Korea. And I'm happy to know now that about half of the Chinese Bibles use the name of Shangdi, which is the name of their native creator God. And many are coming to Christ now in spite of the communist regime and what's happening. And so it's because it connects them to, again, who they are. And it's a God of love. It needs to be that way. Otherwise, why would I want to accept this foreign God who is not ours, and I have to be like his favorite children to be accepted?
Yeah, and so there's something wrong with me. I'm not, my culture isn't good. Only this culture is good. And that's the lie that we're all buying into today, that only my politics are good and my way of thinking is good and everyone else is wrong and evil. There's no place for it in God's economy. You are who God's created to be, and God meets you where you're at and uses you where you're at uniquely. Is there anything, Daniel, in your studies that I'm sure there's dozens upon dozens of things that just floored you, but can you think of something that, just knocked you off your feet?
Well, I would say that it is that the prophecies that have come forth, if we study the native people. I've talked with so many missionaries that say, we don't need to know about them. We just need to know the gospel. But the gospel has to be able to relate to them in that way. And so by looking, I found saying that God wants to communicate to them. And a lot of times it's prophecies of the missionaries coming. And
now that happened in Hawaii, and that was the one prophecy that there was at least one prophecy that you've put in your books that absolutely knocked me off of my feet. I reread it many times and have retold the story of the black box.
Yes. And now I've found 9 prophecies. And spending the time to research and look for them is the thing. So many times we think that it's a waste of time because it's a evil culture, and we don't want to find those things. But all we have to do is look at Paul and what he did at Athens. And if Paul is the apostle that Jesus appointed to the Gentiles, and that's the only sermon we have of his to a people who were not what they call Gentile, believers in God, followers of God, that's the only sermon we have. We should really study it carefully, because it was a very successful 15-minute sermon. And he used all these things from their culture.
Mm. The unknown God, you already know him, the unknown God. And there's a story behind that. And every culture, there has been this cry for God. And I mentioned the black box, and we should probably tell that story because our listeners going, what are you talking about? Would you mind telling that story from Hawaii? It's just, oh my goodness, that blew me away.
Yes, the prophecy was that the God of peace would come in a small black box and speak a language they would not understand. Now, the Hawaiian culture was an oral culture. Everything was passed down orally or through dance and chants. And so when the missionaries arrived, first of all, there was a prophecy again from the last high priest of the old system that the new God would come, and he pointed to a rock on the shore. And when the missionaries...
Oh, we cut out for a moment. Let's see if we can get Daniel back. In the meantime, when the missionaries came, and I think we lost his connection. I'll give him a call back, see if we can get him back on. When the missionaries came, they came to that location at the rock. And what this black box was, absolutely
can't answer your call right now.
He's probably doesn't know we're there. And don't you love this because it's happening live? We'll keep trying to get him back. So in this story, doesn't that sound strange that God would return to the islands in a black box? Like, okay, speaking a language that we don't understand. And yet, on that very rock, and on that rock there in Hawaii, the ship landed. When the missionaries came off the ship, they had what's called a Bible box. A Bible box is because, printing, there's a lot of handwritten works of literature at that time, and going across sea, they would keep it in a box to keep it safe. That's what they came off the ship with. It was, to me, what an astounding story that God was planting the seeds to share the completion of what they've been looking for. And here we are calling Daniel back again. We'll see if we can get him back in Hawaii, in Hilo, Hawaii.
Hello.
Hey, Daniel, I'm so sorry we lost you, but we are back now. Are you good to go?
Yes.
Okay. So the astounding stories, as I finished telling the story of the black box to our live audience, but that story is not unique. This is what's happening all over the world. And I think that we're starting to wrap our heads around God is meeting people where they're at. While the world seems to be falling apart, perhaps everything really is falling into place. Your thoughts?
Yes, God, He's above all the things that are happening now. And He's still in control. He's still working out all things for good. And I think that it's forcing us to really look to Him and rely on Him instead of governments and money and job and the things of this world, and to see that He is our source.
Oh, Daniel, I am so grateful for not just your time today, but sharing this good news, because it just completely decimates the misnomer that it's a white man's religion, it's a Western religion. It's not. It's the God that created the entire earth and loves every person in it. I am so grateful for your time today, and Hilo is my favorite place in the world. There's a piece of my heart that I leave there. I think every time I get to visit family in Hilo, and I hope you're all doing well on the island.
Yes, and next time you come, let me know, and I'd love you to speak at our church. Thank you for what you're doing.
So if you didn't get bing bong, if you didn't get the message that God has been reaching out to you where you're at, wherever you are. No, neither Daniel or I are saying that all roads lead to heaven. What we are saying is that all people are searching for the real God. And if you found a little clue as to what the God story is today, I would encourage you to like this broadcast, share this broadcast, copy and paste the link, send it an email and messages, let folks know. We're starting to reach the world more and more every single week. And the MyMichelleLive podcast, we started in late November, so we're still in our infancy. I really appreciate your support. I appreciate your fiscal support. I appreciate your prayer support. I appreciate your share support. And I encourage you to contact us, because we're real people really looking sincerely for the God story. I don't care what your story is. You're not going to be rejected here. You're awesome. And I want to thank you, and we will catch you tomorrow.
More news and views at MyMichelleLive.com.